Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. Trust you guys had a good night's sleep, feeling refreshed, ready to begin another day. Yesterday was one of those rare, beautiful, just like a really warm, sunny day. Um, awesome to be outside. Today, I'm sitting out here and I can see my breath a little bit. So it's definitely signs that things are beginning to change, and um, and so it's another season. Just um, it'll be uh, it'll be filled with falling leaves in a, in a short while. But I trust where you are. You guys are looking forward to your weekend. I pray for many of us in other states. I know they're planning. They're saying on tomorrow weather could be pretty nasty due to Hurricane Lee. So trusting all of that will kind of pass over quickly and provide rain that we need, but also um, just watch over the those who are affected by the past storms. As we close our week out today, we have been looking at a new series now called "Turn Up the Volume," and it's all about Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is this book that now is beginning to deal with the next generation of those who have come out of Egypt. That first generation, as we're going to discover in our study, it didn't fare well for them, and mainly because they just did not heed God's word. God had given them a path; He had given them direction, and instead, they proved to be arrogant and rebellious, and they just didn't do what God had called them to do, and so consequently, they wound up, just roaming around this desert for like 38 years. And so as they pass away, that generation then does not inherit this land, but it's their children that now are going to inherit this land. It's that next generation that now is given the same opportunity, only they have to make sure that they are different, they are listening, that all of those dissonant voices that are around them, somehow or another, they've learned to turn that down a little bit and turned up the volume on what God is speaking to them as a people. This book is all about listening and acting. And I started thinking about that, saying, boy, here is this generation that's needing a whole new reset for their future. And I thought, how different is that from the days in which we're living today? I mean, we all need this reset, right? We all need this opportunity to begin again. And that reset could come for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's hardships, right? Sometimes it's grief. Sometimes it's our employment situations. There's so many things, that the trials that come on us. And we want to find our faith being renewed and revived, right? So that we have all that we need to continue on in this work, and that we don't fall by the wayside. So, on this Friday, September the 15th, I'd like to take us on one other little journey here this week. Um, if we look to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verses 1 through 5, you're going to find in this text a great deal of geographical uh, markers. We talked about this already in this week, but just a quick review. The first 5 verses in Deuteronomy are really setting the stage for the rest of the book. It introduces us to not only the geography of the land, so that we understand where Israel is in this developing story, right? We also have been given some historical markers, not just geographical ones, but historical ones. For instance, we know that this is 40 years now after they have left Egypt. So a lot happens in those 40 years, and we we recognize that they are now situated on the east side of this Jordan River, another historical marker that now Israel once again has come back into the position to enter this promised land once again. They they failed the first time, and now they have this opportunity once again. So the geography of the land, the history now, where they are in the story, and also the theological side. And we looked at that a little bit yesterday, right? That God spoke to Moses, and Moses then took those words that God had commanded him and began to once again, speak into the lives of the Israelites. He wanted them to see and understand all that God had for them. And it's the same word again, because God is the same yesterday and today and forever. It's not like he has a new truth for today. His truth is the same yesterday, today, forever. And so consequently, Moses, again, 40 years later, is saying the same thing to this next generation, and hoping that they will catch on this time, and that they would fulfill the destiny for which God had called them. So, having talked a little bit about the history, where they are in the story, and a little bit about this theological implications of Revelation and how God really begins this whole story for them, I thought we would look a little bit about geography. And I prepared a number of slides. And what I'd like to do is kind of talk you through these slides. Um, when I transferred them over to this platform that I use for Seize the Day, they didn't come over exactly precise, and I'll point that out. But you'll get the idea. And I think what it will do is just give you a greater appreciation for how this story is laying itself out. Because otherwise, you read all these stories like or towns like the Araba, or Tofel, or Hezebab, and you're like, what? It's like so different. It's not like we're living in our day where we can look on a map and we know where, New York is, right? Or Chicago, you know, um, and you can put places and names, but this is different for us. So what I'd like for us to do is to go back and take a look at this land. And for that, I made a couple of maps, and I'm going to put them up here on the screen for you, and I'm going to try to make this as large as I can. Here we go. How's this? So one of the things, like you can see, the arrows got a little mixed up on the map, but what I want you to see here is where Egypt is. Egypt now and all those tributaries, right? The River Nile. So Egypt is where this whole Exodus begins. And then they go into that Mount Sinai Peninsula. You get that? So Mount Sinai is all the way down at the tip of this little peninsula. Mount Sinai in Deuteronomy is referred to as Horeb, Mount Horeb, Horeb. So Mount Horeb and Mount Sinai are the same. And that's where Israel, when they came out of Egypt, they journeyed all the way down and they camped there. And God gave them his 10 commandments. And he gave them his laws and decrees, right? The stipulations on how they are to live together. What's interesting is all of those stipulations that had to deal with civil law, or ceremonial law, how it had to deal with high feast days. All of those were designed to really play out what the 10 Commandments were giving them in summary form. So if you really love, if you were to love God, you would do what he said, right? And so he's telling you what to do. So your faithfulness towards him would be determined by how well you put into practice his words. Tell me that's any different than what Jesus told us: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. He says on these two hang all of the law and the prophets. So everything that God is saying can be boiled down to these two substantive points about our love for God and our love for neighbor. So on our map, if you could just look at those arrows, just put them up just a little bit further up, what you'll see is the Sea of Galilee is up on the top. That connects, that filters down into the Jordan River, and then empties into Moab. Enters into the Dead Sea, which is on your map, if you can see that on your screens, it's around that region of Moab. So Moab is, and notice the directional sign here where north is pointing. So that means east would be on the other side of the Dead Sea, on the other side of this Jordan River. The west side of that Jordan River would bring you in the direction of the Mediterranean Sea, right? So just to give you this idea, there's always the Sea of Galilee was known by a different name during the days of Moses, but I thought I would just use a familiar name just to give you that body of water. So you have the Sea of Galilee trickling down into the Jordan River and then into the Dead Sea. And where we find ourselves now is we're on the east side of that river. Well, there were a number of, if you have your Bibles open with you, what I'd like to do now is just take you to a couple of different places here. I just tightened this map up a little bit now so that the names that are going to appear in our story, I want you to begin to see how this now is going to work itself out. So I'm going to put onto the screen some of the names as they appear in Deuteronomy 1 through 5. So the first thing we hear about, right, is the Arabah. The Arabah is that section of land. It really was about 200 miles long, and it actually went from the Red Sea, right, all the way up to the bottom of the Dead Sea, all the way up along the Jordan River and up towards Galilee. It was in that part of the land was known as the Arabah. But by this time, Moses, it was this was referring to that plot of land below the Dead Sea and going towards the Red Sea. So now the Arabah, it began to talk. This is where he's giving us an indication of where Israel is at this moment in time, right? So he mentions a place like Suf, and Suf is all the way up towards the middle of that Dead Sea on the east side of that river. So I put like a little red dot there. He also talked about two other places in your book. One is called Paran, and the other is called Tafel. And so you notice that this is the land that's now beginning to move from the Sinai Peninsula across the Arabah up to Tafel and up to Zuf, right? So this shows movement now of the nation of Israel during this period of time. But in your text, he also talks to us about a place called Laban. Notice that's a little further down now. It's still north of the Red Sea and a little southwest of the Arabah, and this is that area of land that the Israelites were marching through. He goes on and he talks about another place. It was called Hazeroth, and you can see that on the map. It's another little dot that I put going down that peninsula. And from Hazeroth, it says they went down even further south to a place called Dizahab. Dizahab was another place, another city, and you can see that again on the side of this Red Sea, moving itself up the east side of the Sinai Peninsula. And then he says that he makes this reference that it's an 11-day journey from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea. So what is that saying to you and me? Well, what it's saying is if Horeb is Mount Sinai, where they received these 10 commandments, then take a look at what your map is telling you. I put them in circles now. So all the way down at the bottom of this Sinai Peninsula, you see Mount Sinai. And Mount Sinai, going up to Kadesh Barnea, it said it took them 11 days. So now why am I showing you all these places and stuff? Because what I want you to realize is on the east side of this river, going where the Araba is all the way up to Zuf, right, which is the northern easternmost part of the dots here that I put on there. And from that place, you could see this is where the Israelites now, they're on the east side of this river. And they have to make some choices now about what they're going to do, and are they going to really take over this land like God had commanded them early on in our studies. Right, this week we looked about how God through Moses told them to go and take this land, that he would be with them, that he would provide for them, that they should not be afraid, that that he has already given them this land. So the same way in which God delivered them out of Egypt, God's saying to them now, no, I want you to go into this land. So notice the dots. The dots here are that journey from Mount Sinai through Dizahab into Hazeroth, up to Laban, up to Paran, up to Kadesh Barnea. And it's from that area that the Israelites began their journey. When they got to Kadesh Barnea, we're going to discover that there was a time, and this coming weekend, we're going to talk a little bit about that. It was about the time of the spies that went out into the land to spy out the land that they were supposed to now conquer. But that first generation, when they got to Kadesh Barnea and went, they kind of stalled there. And the rest of this story, really, for the previous 40 years, is that they never really get past that Kadesh Barnea. That generation that came out of Egypt gets stalled, and now they're waiting in this area of Kadesh Barnea, and they never really quite make it up into that land. And so what do? They wind up having to turn around and go back the way they came. And for the next 38 years, because they were about 2 years down in Mount Sinai, for the next 38 years, they're wandering around that same wilderness again. See, God never brought them to Kadesh Barnea for them to turn back. He brought them to Kadesh Barnea and said, no, now I want you to go forward. I want you to take over this land. But they never did. And consequently, as you can see from your map, they just went back down the way they came. They wound up circling around in this wilderness for like 38 years. But now we find them up in that region near Zuf. And we're also told, right, in our study here in Deuteronomy 1-5, we were also told about 2 of the kings of the Amorites. So I want to show you something else on your map here. So this is where they were, and this is how they traveled again up to Kadesh Barnea, through the Araba, up past Tophel, up to Zuf. So this is where they are at present in Deuteronomy. And how they got there, this is all about this area of the land now that I'm showing you on this map. So this area in the box is where Israel is at the moment, but they're on the east side of that Jordan River, right? Well, the 2 kings that were mentioned were 2 kings that were from the Amorite region. And if you notice on this map, there is the mention of Heshbon, so you could see that there. And that was where the battle with Shihon took place. So you can see clearly here, right, the Dead Sea, the Jordan River, and the Sea of Galilee all the way up to the top. So they took on Shihon, the king of the Amorites. That was the region of the Amorites in that region. They defeat him. They also go on, and you see up, way up on the top, it says Bashan. Bashan, it says, was the region by which Og, another one of those kings, that he was king over all of this territory. So you notice from the north to the south parts here, all along that Jordan River, that was the area now that the Israelites were engaged. And what they also did, if you notice, there was a mention in Deuteronomy 1 of the city called Edra. And Edra was where the battle with Og took place. So here you have all of these places. It says that the kingdom, the capital for uh, for um, Og was in a town called Ashtaroth, and that's just a short journey north of Edra. So in this battle, you can see they come down. The Og comes down to Edra where they fight. Heshbon, the Israelites come up, from like Tophel area down on the bottom all the way up. So they wind up fighting in this whole region, and that becomes part of the land that they capture on the east side of the Jordan. This is land now that they are occupying. There are 12 tribes in Israel, and what we're discovering now is that the two and a half of these tribes will receive this land, but they will go with their brothers into the promised land, which is on the west side of this Jordan River, going towards the Mediterranean. So that's all the promised land that they are to go and conquer. So I gave you a lot today, but I'm just trying to give you the layout of this land. And so this is where we find the Israelites now, in this region of the country. And now they're situated here, but they haven't really fulfilled the rest of this mandate into going and taking over this land. They've had a good start. They've taken on two of the major giants in this land, the Shihan and Og, these two kings of the Amorites. And that's where they are now. So they've gone a little further than their predecessors have, right? Their predecessors, they never really made it that far past Kadesh Barnea. But now these guys have come across the Arabah, up the eastern side of the Jordan, and this is where they are at this moment. And now they are there and at the end of verse 5, it says Moses expounded to them the law, saying, and now we're going to get the instruction that Moses wants to give them before they get into this land. So let me just capture this, because throughout the rest of the book, it's good for you to have this in your head. They're not fully into this promised land. They've taken Heshbon and Edra, this whole region above Moab, and now part of that land is going to be given over to 2.5 tribes of Israel. The rest of that group is going to go over the Jordan River and conquer this other land. This should have all been done 40 years ago, but instead they rebelled against God's decree. They wound up once again going back down into that Sinai region, and they just wasted a whole lot of time. So what I want you to see here, as I just bring you back to this map, while they are on that east side here, they wind up going all the way back down to Mount Sinai again. And the promises that God has made for them, that first generation is forfeited. So what Moses is saying in the opening verses of Deuteronomy is that here are people, this next generation, and it's all about, okay, how well are you guys going to listen, right? It's all about how well are you now going to take seriously this word from God? Because if you do, you're going to need what I'm having to say to you right now, because this is God's will, this is God's purposes. You got to do it His way, and as you cross over, you'll find yourself victorious. Now, when I think about these stories, I think, okay, in here, right, we've already been told about these two Amorite kings. We're going to hear a little bit more about them in Deuteronomy, in chapters 2 and 3. But suffice it to say for today, those two kings, Shihon and Og, they were part of the giants that lived in that land. And so now Israel has already seen how, with the help of the Lord, they can defeat these giants. So they should be encouraged. They should be, once again, predisposed to taking God seriously and then achieving the victory that He has for them on the other side of this river. I wonder how many times there are moments like that for you and for me. This coming Sunday, I'm going to be speaking about defining moments. Those moments in your life where maybe at the moment you didn't see them as being so critical. But in that moment, looking back, you can see how the decision that you made there, the way in which you responded, it set your life on a whole different kind of a course. I mentioned the fact that for me, when I was in my middle 20s and I made this profession of faith, it set my life on a whole nother direction. Because when I made that profession of faith, and then I made the decision to take that next step, for me, it was a matter of curiosity. I needed to know more about what it was that I was believing. And so one day I was in a Bible study, and this older gentleman there, he probably got tired of me asking so many questions, because in the midst of the study, he looked at me and says, Bruce, you have so many questions. You should just go to seminary. And I remember leaving that study and thinking, seminary is for like religious people. And, like I'm not going to do that. And then the next thing you know, that idea just started chipping away at me. And next thing you know, I took a ride up there to seminary in June. And by September, I was enrolled. And that decision then to just take that next step in my faith brought me to Philadelphia, where over the course of those years, this calling was solidified for me, that so it changed my whole vocation. It changed the way in which I would invest my life. It also brought me to Philadelphia, where I met my wife, Cindy. And now this coming year, we're going to be married 42 years. And I think that one moment, hey, Bruce, you ought to go to seminary. You have too many questions. How I reacted to that was one of those defining moments for me. I didn't realize it at the time, but in the providence of God, man, it changed so much of my life. How about you? Sometimes they could work in a not so good direction, right? And you look back and you thought, man, if I only. I'm sure that there were moments like that for those Israelites who reneged on that promise, and yet that moment had passed for them. Now this is a moment for this present generation, and are they going to take it? That's what Deuteronomy is all about, getting them ready to do that. But we also have this insight now with Jesus, right? Who promises to bring renewal into one's life. So there may be times for you right now where you're thinking, boy, I wish I just had this eraser where I can erase certain chapters in my life, or I can untie the knots that I've tied. And you find it impossible, right? Because there are consequences to our actions, even in this life. But here's the thing. God is coming alongside and saying, I could redeem those days. I can make you into a new person. You give your life to me, and I will take that sin, and I will cast it into the bottom of the sea, never to be remembered again. Taking that burden off of one's shoulders and helping us to see a whole new future because of what God has for us. My friends, that's exactly what's taking place for this generation now that we read about in Deuteronomy. All they have to do is this simple thing. They just got to turn up the volume and listen to God's voice. Well, tune in this week for this next part of our journey through the book of Deuteronomy. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Um, Sometimes if you have some of these questions, you could just email me at bboria@bethanychurch.com. Be happy to respond. And I'm just looking forward to walking through this study with you. Much to learn. So God bless you, my friends. Have a great weekend. Go out, seize the day, never forgetting that God is good all the time. God bless you.